Okay, in our last video we did some sectionalizing of a problem with brake fluid loss in a master cylinder. We found out that it was a bad brake line on the rear wheel of this vehicle. Now we're going to replace the brake line. So I got to go off to the auto parts store to pick up some brake line. A couple of things I wanted to know. You can see there's a 12mm wrench on there. I wanted to see the size of the fittings on this. And you can see a little black electrical tape over the brake line. That's just, I wanted to get a rough idea of the length of it. So I just ran some of that over there. I'll just measure the tape, take that tape off, measure it, and that'll give me a rough idea of the length of the line that we're going to need. A lot of times, obviously, the very easiest way to do this is to get the pre-bent line. I called the dealer and they didn't even have it, or so they told me anyway. So anyway, that's not an option. In this case, we're going to bend the line. Okay, so straightened out our black electrical tape. It came out to slightly less than 2 feet, so a 2-foot length of line should be just about perfect. And we know that we want a 12mm end on it. Normally, to change a brake line out in this situation, I would just remove the rear wheel, which I may have to do, but this is a Pontiac Sunfire. There's actually lots of room in here. That's a 12mm bleeder screw. Ideally, by the way, you want to have the box wrench made for brake lines. I can't find mine for this size right at the moment, so I'm just going to be careful about it. I cleaned this up with a wire brush and sprayed cleaner on it last night, knowing I was going to do this job to loosen it up. So I'm going to attempt to do this with the rear wheel on. If it doesn't work, I'll update you. The thing we have to do too is, there's our brake line. Hopefully you can see this. There's a bracket. And over here, we're going to have to remove that so our brake line will pop out of the bracket. Okay, that's a 7mm nut on there. Just removing that from the bracket now. And I could open up that bracket, but seeing as how I got the other end of the line off, I'm just gonna pull it up and over, and then I'll slide it onto our new brake line that we're gonna make. Okay, so our brake fitting came off of the back of the brake drum there, no problem. The brake line broke, but that doesn't matter. I'm gonna replace that anyway, so that came out. But like any other job that you go to do around a car, usually there's bound to be some other kind of a little issue. This isn't a particularly big deal, but the other end of the line, because the brake fluid was leaking around it and the line was all corroded, see if I can pick this up on the camera here, that stripped when I was trying to remove it, because it's not really an honest 12mm fitting anymore. The brake fluid has corroded it. So anyways, I'm going to take my vice grips, get a good grip on that. I'm going to file some flats on it first, and we'll get that out of there. And then incidentally, I'm going to either stick a plug in that or tie wrap it with some rubber, because I don't want this, while I'm doing this job, to leak too much brake fluid, or I'll have to end up bleeding all the brake lines, which I prefer not to do. Okay, so our brake line broke off there. As I said, we're gonna get that bleeder screw off there a little later. And I stuck a little plug that I have in there just to keep it from losing too much brake fluid. Normally, if I'm in a rush and I have to get a vehicle back on the road, I will just buy the brake line from the manufacturer of the vehicle, which gets pricey. But in this case, I called, this is a Pontiac Sunfire we're working on. I called the dealer and they said they didn't even have them. So that made it easy. Now the good thing about it is it's going to be a cheaper way to do it. The way I'm going to do it here. We're going to bend these brake lines. 2 of these were less than $7 here in Canada. So it would have been a lot more than that if I had the pre-made line. Only thing is, we do have to bend it into this shape. So what we're going to do is bend them the old-fashioned method that I was shown when I was growing up, and
hanging around with the old guys in garages. So we're going to use pulleys.
That fitting I was trying to remove because of the fact that it was only held in place by that the clip and then the groove along the brake flex hose here, and it seized so bad I couldn't get enough torque onto it to actually get it out. So this is a small flex hose. It goes from here over to this point. We can see a similar type clip holding that in place, and the metal part that is grooved and that will fit into. So what I might have to do here is I got to get this flex hose off, hopefully without damaging it. I checked with the local dealership, it's about $13 for that, which is ridiculous. Okay, I'm going to try to release that rusted brake line there with my 12mm wrench. I seriously got to find my brake line wrenches that'll lock on that, but this is the right size. I don't expect this to release without... No, I can tell that's seized already, so I'm going to end up, as I say, cutting that down. We're going to take this clip out of there and release the whole unit. I'll just cut this. That's going to strip anyway. It's all seized up. Okay, so you notice here that I cut the line very close to the fitting on the brake end because I'm going to be using this line as my template when I make my new brake line. Okay, that brake flex hose was seized so bad on the bracket it was actually easier for me to remove the bracket from the car, take it off here onto my bench and pound it out. I think I'm actually going to insert a little clip of the video where I pounded this out just to show how seized these flex hoses can get in places like Canada where there's a lot of rust and salt on the roads. Anyway, the flex hose just goes up into the bracket. It'll only go one way. You'll notice if you're changing this out, you have to turn it and then it'll fit into the bracket at one point, and then the clip slides over to put pressure on the flex hose and keep it in place. Okay, just installing that bracket and flex hose there, back on. That's a 10mm bolt on that. And when you put it on, it's going to line up with that hole in the frame right over there. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, so basically I'm going to summarize the end of the video here. I'm hoping that I managed to get everything into the video I wanted to. I ran into a bunch of other jobs here, as I mentioned, about the brake flex hose having to be replaced here. This is the brake line here that goes back towards the front of the vehicle. That had to be replaced. I had to redo this brake line here. That's one thing I want to mention for sure, because of the fact that our brake fitting up here was a little unique. Let's see if we can get my finger. That was long. I'm going to insert that part into the video. I'm actually going to make a couple of videos off of this. I don't want to make this video go on forever, but that was, I'm going to talk about that. I had to salvage this brake line fitting here. I would have just bought it, only I'm out in the boonies, and it's a long drive. Basically, or a long drive into the city to get that one. My local auto parts store did not have that that brake line fitting up there that I just showed. So, a couple minor issues. The bolt here broke, no biggie. I just put another one. That hole goes through. Put another bolt on there. There's our bracket, and we can see up the end of the vehicle. That's where I cut the brake line at up there. There's the flex hose I was talking about. Didn't get the shot of it in the last video there. Anyway, we talked about that. It was rusted into the bracket. We had to take the bracket off, all that kind of stuff.